Now, why would I be suspicious of these sorts of narratives going around? Okay. Well, one of the things that I always keep in mind is something my brother has insisted on for many, many years, which is that he has always got the sense, my brother now, that the authorities and that the power structure actually wants to provoke the public, the British natives, into doing something in a classic, problem reaction solution type of scenario, where actually provoking some sort of nativist action will then justify some sort of crackdown coming down the line. Okay. Another way of putting that is the crisis on Leviathan idea, which is by Robert Higgs back in the day. So that's one reason to be suspicious of it. Another reason that I'm suspicious of it is because it does not accord with my own analysis drawn from elite theory and so on as to how exactly these sorts of civil conflicts that he's talking about are going to manifest. Okay. So, I mean, in the interest of fairness, I will lay out his argument. If you haven't seen the Betts interview, I mean, he's basically got one interview that he's done several different times. But in a nutshell, he is saying that if Britain and Europe more broadly carries on the current trajectory that they're going on, we're going to have civil conflict down the line. Okay. Now, when he says civil war, he does not mean civil war in the sense of Somalia having a civil war, or the American Civil War, or even something like the Roundheads versus the Cavaliers, Cromwell versus the Royalists. He doesn't mean civil war on that sort of scale, where it's kind of like armed, the Syrian civil war, something like that. He doesn't mean on that level. What he means is a kind of lower level civil conflict where there's an increased amount of sectarian violence. And the two examples he kept on coming back to, and I'll deal with each of them in turn in my rebuttal coming up. The two examples he talks about time and again are the peasants' revolts that happened in medieval England. Okay. Specifically, I'm guessing he has in mind the peasants' revolt of 1381, which was against Richard II. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then the other example he has is the Troubles in Northern Ireland, which was again a kind of ongoing low-level sectarian violence with flashpoints at particular times. Okay, and Betts is arguing that on our current trajectory, in 5 years' time, we're going to have a situation where it's like the Troubles everywhere. Okay. He talks about elite overproduction, which is something that Peter Turchin also talks about. And he says, there are going to be a certain amount of disgruntled elites who feel like they should be part of the ruling class, so to speak, or part of the elite, who have been denied that, who join the rebellion, right? Who join the other side of the conflict, if you want to put it that way. He talks about mass immigration, and he talks about sectarianism and Islam and things like that. Okay. And somehow, because those, it's almost like a tick box exercise. He's got like 10, 15 different conditions that need to be met, to reach this academic definition of civil war. And he says, basically at the moment, they're all ticked. So, it's coming. Now, the trouble is, friends, is that there are certain practicalities, certain practical aspects of even a peasant's revolt, or even this kind of sectarian violence that we saw in Northern Ireland, that are also necessary, that I think David Betts overlooks. Okay. I also think he significantly overlooked another factor that Peter Turchin definitely talks about in his work, as does Joseph Tainter and various other people that I discussed in The Prophets of Doom. And that is really the question of bread and circuses. Okay. Because if you have a look at times where you've had wide-scale revolts or rebellions, usually there's a breakdown in the bread and the circuses. Usually it's over some actual issue, often taxation, right? Punitive taxation, or something that has affected what Fernand Braudel would call the structure of everyday life. Okay, either a punitive tax has come in, which gets people backs up, or I don't know, the government has overspent, and it means people are going hungry, or they're having to spend more of their income on basics, on food and shelter, on food especially. Okay, and economists talk about a threshold, about 33% threshold, beyond which then things start getting dicey. I.e., if wages, if food reaches 33% of wages, then you're in trouble. Well, I was in Sainsbury's this morning. I bought an Easter egg for £3 reduced. Food is nowhere near that level. So the bread part of the bread and circuses, as things stand, I would not tick that box. Right? People are satiated. People have enough to eat. People have Albania. To quote Jonathan Bowden, or to paraphrase Bowden, they've got they've got Albanians bringing them food on a little motorbike at 2 a.m. if they want it, right? With Uber Eats or Deliveroo or whatever. Okay, I mean, food has never been more abundant. Even now, even in Keir Starmer's Britain, you can do a weekly shop for less than £100. Okay, and most people probably are not on less than £100. And I'm talking about a family of 4. So that's one thing. Second thing is on the circuses front. Now, I was kind of interested because I had a conversation the other day over Easter with family and so on, and the conversation got round to how our kids now don't watch TV anymore. Right? They're growing up in a streaming on-demand environment, which means that you miss out on all sorts of things. Like, one of the things that was said in this conversation I had was like, a mother talking about how her girls have no idea that the snooker is on, for example, right now, or that Wimbledon is on in because the ubiquity of the television, which was kind of always on when we grew up in the 80s and the early 90s, was kind of always there in the background. So you kind of had a sense, oh, Wimbledon's on, or oh, the snooker's on. Well, now, of course, the TV only goes on to watch, something on Amazon Prime or something on Netflix or whatever. So there's not that kind of background thing. Okay. Now, this is a separate point, but this is what we were talking about. But it did get me interested in, well, okay, but are people still en masse consuming slop from the streaming services? Okay, there's been a decline in, television, live television, but are young people in generally watching other forms of slop, on demand? And in fact, I had a look. I had a look how the circuses are doing, right? And I've got lots of interest. The BBC's iPlayer overtook Netflix as the top streaming service for over 55s, right? So people are still watching BBC. Look, if you have a look, UK consumers watching TV for an hour plus a day, right? Live TV, old-fashioned terrestrial television. Well, that's going down, look. But if you have a look, the proportion of people watching iPlayer is going up, right? So about half of people are still watching BBC. They're just watching it in a different form. Now, these two numbers, the live TV number and the iPlayer number, we don't know how much they overlap. I mean, if those people are watching live TV, 36%, let's just say, well, how many of those 46% are the same as those 36%? We don't know, right? So it could actually be double that amount. Could actually be almost 80% of people watching some form of slop on a regular basis, right? That's it. That's here's one with The Guardian. The proportion of people watching traditional TV in a week has dropped from 83% to 79%, according to The Guardian. Okay. So, I mean, these are still pretty high numbers, is what I'm saying. Here is GB News talking to Slop. Despite plummeting revenue from the license fee, the BBC has scored a critical victory over Netflix. UK adults spend more time watching BBC content than Netflix. Weekly figures show the BBC topples all streaming services combined. Netflix starts from £5 a month compared to 14 quid for the TV license fee. Streams on BBC iPlayer enjoyed a 10% boost year on year. Right? Despite this, 500,000 households cancelled the license fee. Broadcaster still needs to find £200 million. Okay? The point I'm making here is that just because people don't watch old-fashioned television doesn't mean they're not getting their slop, right? As far as I can see, the bread and the circuses question is not, hasn't actually been affected. We lived through COVID, right? We lived through BLM. We lived through all of these disruptions, right? Noisy disruptions, and nothing bloody happened because the structure of everyday life was not actually disturbed, really, even through COVID. You know, your little Albanian was still there giving you your food. There's your food, sir. Thank you very much. Now you can sit down and watch your daily slop. I can eat my slop and I can watch my slop. Double slop. And now COVID is restricted. Well, I can eat my slop, I can watch my slop, and when I'm not doing that, I can grill. And I can pay my taxes. Do you remember I've talked about before? Taxes and grilling, taxes and grilling. Well, none of those things are seriously being messed with on the sort of level that we saw in the 1381 peasants' revolt. Or we do not have organization like we had in the Troubles in Northern Ireland, which brings me on to my second point. And my second point is there may be widespread discontent with mass immigration. There may be widespread discontent with the direction things are going. Okay. But surprise, surprise, elite theory fans, resistance, armed rebellion and things like that require organization. They require planning. They require a command structure. They require people actually to conspire in real life. And at the moment, you've got many people who are essentially atomized individuals. You know, the ones who are not completely consumed with eating their double slop, by which I mean watching Netflix and eating their Albanian Deliveroo food. Okay, so those people you can take out of it entirely, right? Forget those. They are just not going to get involved. Well, let's just take those people who are politically active, politically activated, if you want to put it that way. Most of those people, let's face it, are on social media. They are tweeting out their discontent, which, for one thing, tells the government who is unhappy. Okay, it gives a data point. Oh, this dude over here, he's not very happy. Oh, this guy who's making Facebook posts here, he's not very happy. So it gives information to the authorities if you're on social media doing that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, as long as you're doing that, what you're not doing is meeting up in pubs or warehouses or churches or cellars or conspiring. You're not conspiring, let's face it. You making a tweet that gets 10,000 likes is not conspiring. It's not politics in that way. It's not kind of low-level civil conflict, you know, to tweet out discontent. Every time you ratio Keir Starmer, you're not actually doing anything. Okay? And this is why I've talked about containment so many times. You think your job is done because you've let it be known that you're not happy with the Prime Minister and you've ratioed the Prime Minister. And as I've talked about in Populist Illusion, the Prime Minister doesn't give a shit. He just, you can ratio him all day long, all year long, for 5 years, and he won't care. Okay? The Prime Minister will care if you meet up in a cellar and start conspiring with other people about armed rebellion. Oh my gosh, he'll care. And you'll very quickly get a knock on the door, and you'll very quickly get the full force of the law getting involved. full force of the law will get involved super quickly. Okay, let's talk about Richard II, who was 14 years old in 1381, and the Peasants' Revolt, shall we? The Peasants' Revolt came about because of punitive taxes that were levied initially by Edward III, okay, for some sort of war that he wanted. I mean, I can't remember the actual reason.